Welcome to episode 3. We're here with Jimmy Sinclair from the People outfit in Canterbury Rugby, and I've got to say I'm pumped for this.
Kia ora, welcome. Thanks for having me on, Marcus. Privileged to be here. Always appreciate your time, actually, just to connect. I feel as though I learn just as much from connecting with you. Looking forward to a good conversation today, like always. Me
too. We were just talking off camera about delight, and I can say that it is a delight to have you here. So looking forward to unpacking all things people and culture and team and leadership, and pulling on your experience as a coach and as a consultant as well through the People outfit. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got here and what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, awesome. So I guess I'll start where I grew up. I grew up in Tauranga, beautiful place. Spent a lot of time at the Mount. Enjoyed my schooling up there. Made some great friends up there. And my dad is Scottish, and my mum was born and bred. She's from Canterbury, so they moved down here at the end of my high school year. And then I actually decided originally. I went very far away from being a consultant or a coach. Straight out of high school, my first job was trying to become a qualified tiler with my dad, and I quickly learned that you have to have a pretty special relationship to work with your dad, Dave. And so that dad actually taught me a lot. I did a lot of work with him. Taught me a lot around hard work for sure. But in the end, where I ended up trade-wise was an exterior plasterer. And then I went to university later in life when I was 22 and studied a Bachelor of Sports Coaching, which was a new degree at the time. And that degree was real diverse. That's where I learned a lot about like sociology, psychology, understanding like pedagogy and the way people learn. And I just knew that was like a space that I was really passionate about. Jumped into that. And then from there, after my degree, I actually, believe it or not, I knew that I was passionate about growing people, and I knew that sport was a key vehicle for that because it had helped me. And so all I really wanted to do was work in sport in any facet. And a random job showed up at Bowls, Canterbury.
Bowls, Canterbury?
Yeah, Lawn Bowls, as a development officer.
Okay.
You know? So I was like, I don't even care what the sport is. I'm just passionate to help people enable their life through sport. So part of the critical role with that job was helping young people get into lawn bowls. And so the young people that I worked with in that space, they were often not, getting selected for team sports, or they might have been more individual in the way they operated. So bowls was really cool for that. So it gave me a massive insight into what allows young people to play and feel confident. And then from there, I was real lucky. I sparked a cool relationship with a guy that worked at Sport Canterbury, Aaron Webb, who's now the Crusaders Academy manager. And at the time, he supported us with an initiative we were doing with young people. And from there, then I went to the military, and I was a physical training instructor, which taught me a lot around how to work within big groups. It taught me a lot around, you could say discipline, I suppose, but also a lot about what makes good leadership. I think I had two amazing leaders that I learned a lot off in that space, which was awesome. And then from there, then I went to Sport Canterbury, which was really exciting. Spent a long time there. And from there, then I went to Canterbury Rugby, and then that's kind of where I'd always coached, whether it was junior staff but then when I went to Canterbury Rugby, then I started getting presented with some really lucky opportunities in clubland, and then I was lucky enough to spend some time with New Zealand Sevens pre-COVID, and which was really cool, and lucky enough to had a cool trip to the Youth Olympics, which was cool. Worked with an awesome guy called Chad Tuado, who was the high performance manager or campaign manager for that whole program, and learnt a truckload off him. And then from there, I've just kept on coaching and kept on enjoying it. And then COVID hit, and the sports world kind of got turned upside down, because a lot of the sports world relies on funding from organisations such as RATA or the council, and a lot of that funding was up in the air because tourism was really low, and tourism feeds into some of those funders, not all of them, but so we really had no job security. But one of the best trainings I ever went on personally was in the military on a 6-day leadership course, where we were introduced to a thing called Hogan profiling, which was a personality profile software, I guess, or system that only dealt with reputation rather than your identity. So it only looked at how people see you. So it really hit you hard in terms of like, as a leader, I would say, for example, I believe I'm a caring leader, but then people would say I'm really black and white and I'm a bit prickly. So anyway, COVID hit, and randomly there was a workshop going to become a Hogan qualified, accredited, basically person that could like run the profiles on people and help support their growth and development. So it was 2020, had no job security. So yeah, I just like paid out some savings, and that's when I met you as well, and you helped me heaps around that process of getting an understanding of like what are you trying to achieve with your business, and it kind of just became a side hustle, and still is a side hustle that I really enjoy to this day, and still have a few regular clients that are like really into the Hogan profiling, because it takes a lot of vulnerability, I think, for people to open themselves up to go through that process. So I've really enjoyed it, and it's enabled me to work across different sectors rather than just sport. So working with people that kind of want to invest in themselves and get a better awareness of who they are and how that affects their leadership or their day-to-day, the way that they operate and lead themselves. So yeah.
Cool.
And then, so that's a bit about me.
And so tell me about, and people at home watching or listening, how you ended up in your current role with Canterbury Rugby.
Yeah.
And also just to touch on the people outfit, like what do you do? So who are some of your clients through that right now?
Yeah, I've been really lucky with, the people outfit is a lot around sport. So like I do some work with Row in New Zealand, been lucky to do some work with New Zealand Rugby, done some work with like Matatu and the Crusaders, with some of their athletes. So it is heavily in sport at the moment, which is really cool, and that's just kind of growing basically by kind of word of mouth, I suppose. People saying this is a really good process because I think every organisation talks around growing leaders, and so as soon as they hear of something good, I think that they're interested. Sometimes it's just they don't know where to look. And then I'm really lucky at the moment. Yeah, I'm obviously a full-time coach within Canterbury Rugby, with the Canterbury team. Very privileged to be in that space. And how did I get to that space? I suppose I've been lucky. I kind of, from a head coaching point of view, I was really lucky with that Youth Olympics program. Well, an opportunity presented itself where I literally started as a video analysis for that team. And through some circumstances, some coaches became unavailable because it was a 2-year program leading up to the Youth Olympics, around you going around the country, selecting the team to start with, doing a few Oceania tournaments, getting prepared. And over that time, some coaches sadly were unavailable. And so, yeah, it was kind of last person standing was me. And the campaign manager was like, mate, you can just be the head coach and just take the team. You've been there from the beginning, so you know the players really well and you know what we're trying to achieve. And then Chad Tuado, like I said, the campaign manager, helped me out hugely in that space. And so, yeah, that kind of gave me my first ever full experience of being a head coach at kind of in that performance level. I'd done some stuff at Clubland, and some Premier Men grades, but in terms of being in the black jersey or supporting the black jersey, that was kind of my first exposure to that. Yeah, and so that was my first opportunity. And then from there, I've kind of just kept in touch with Canterbury Rugby. Over the time, I used to be a coach educator in that space, so coach the coaches. So I think from an understanding of what makes great coaching, I understood that because that was the world that I lived in for 6 years in that space. And so then when the job came up, I was really lucky and had a good relationship with some of the key decision makers in that organisation, and just went through the process and lucky enough to be there.
Cool. Yeah, it's always interesting hearing people's backstory, because I think there's so much of your backstory that informs the way you think now and the decisions you make. So we'll come back to touch on a couple of things there, but I'm curious what you think the business world could learn from the sporting world, because the sporting world is all about high performance.
Yes.
And I don't think the business world is in its entirety. There's obviously segments of the market companies which are, but what do you think sport and business, or what do you think business rather could learn from sport?
Oh, it's funny you say that, because a lot of people ask that question.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. And then every time I do it, I think, or every time I talk to business people or people that just work in different organisations in general, a lot of the stuff's the same. Like I think it goes back to, as you said earlier, when we were off camera, but a lot of when we talk about human behaviour, whether you are on a kiwi fruit orchard, or whether you are selling houses for Ray White, or whether you're working for the ministry somewhere, like we're all a group of people, and we're trying to get to a common goal. And I think the biggest challenge that we don't have is that there's often misalignment around what are we actually all trying to achieve. So what's the vision? What's the origin story of the organisation you belong to? So how did they come to be where they are today? Where did they start? What were some of the key things that allowed them and that enabled them to still be around today? And then where are we going in the future? And then the mission is how we're going to get there. And I think it's funny because even if you would ask last year with our FUC campaign, we had, I think, 45 athletes that had come through the program, and then we had about 16 support staff from a team doctor to a physio to a video analysis person to a psychiatrist. And I even think then, if you were to ask every single person what's the vision and how we're going to get there, I don't know if we'd all be aligned. I would hope that we would be, but I don't know if we actually would. And I think that's just the nature of anything to do with leadership, is how are you getting the group to feel as though they're adding value to the vision of where we're going. And once you get people feeling as though they add value and they understand what their role is and how it's impacting where the group's heading, that's when you're going to get some really good results. And when you get misalignment around people don't even know what the vision is, whether they are the person that is the person that's cleaning the corridors in the evening, or whether they're the person like the CEO making the hardest decisions of the day. Like, I think having everyone to understand that is massive. So, yeah, again, it all comes back to people. Like, and you got to get to know the person before the performer. And then I suppose for us it's like, behind every player is a person, and then behind every person is a story. So how do you get to know their story, and how do you get to know the person before you get to know the player? And say, for example, like if you're selling houses, it's behind every sales person is the person. So how do we get to know them? So what can they learn? I think definitely when it comes to building a vision, building alignment amongst people and getting the best out of people, rather than getting the best out of them from an operational point of view, is probably a critical piece that I think business could learn from sport.
Mate, you've just
rattling it off.
You've just let off a bomb and walked off there, and so there's so many different little tangents we could go off, but I just want to start with the vision, because I think that's the first. In my experience, if you ask 100 business owners what's your vision, most of them won't be able to tell you. The vast majority, I would say, again, in my experience, it would be less than 20% could actually give you a meaningful definition of what their vision is. And then if you ask them to if you ask their teams directly, what's the vision of this business you're working for, this company you're working for? Less than 2% will be able to tell you.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And I don't believe the same is true in sport. I think in high performance sport, you would get a much higher ratio. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, that's interesting. I don't know. I reckon there's a piece there where, in reviews that I've done in the past, you'd be surprised, I think, even with some performance teams, that sometimes there is misalignment around what the players, and I've experienced it myself as a coach. Like one of the biggest learnings I ever had was coaching the New Zealand Development Sevens team, and we were going into a tournament against the top team. We had China, Japan, and we had one other team there. Anyway, we were we'd spent the week together, 7 days in camp, and then when the tournament was coming up, and one of the campaign manager or the performance manager challenged me and said, do you think every player understands what you're trying to achieve this weekend? And so the title of our team was the New Zealand Sevens Development Team. So the name development was in there. We weren't the full-time Blackferns. So we had a mixture of current contracted players who had come down from the top team, and then we had a mixture of 18-year-old players who showed promise, and we wanted to give them exposure to what the next level was like. And so literally in the hotel room that night, we quickly brought in one younger player and then 2 older players, and we just said, what do you guys think the purposes of this weekend? And sure enough, I think one of the senior players said to go out and win. And then I think the younger players said, for me to get development and exposure. So straight off the bat, we were like, oh, right, okay, that's interesting. So we assumed as a management group that like it was really clear that with the title development that it was about going out and giving players opportunity. But actually we had a missed alignment. So in the morning we just had a team meeting to get real clarity around what the management group expected and what's the expectation of what we're trying to achieve over the next 2 days. So again, I think even at high performance sport, it's just I think everyone assumes that we do it really, really well. And sometimes we do, definitely. But I definitely think we can learn stuff from the business world too.
For sure. And
I think the second part of that to that, in today's world with the Generation Z and the way that they operate, one of the critical pieces that I've learnt coaching that group is that it's got to be co-designed, some of the vision and stuff. That it's really hard these days to get buy-in just by having a bit more of a traditional approach, which is like, the management group or the head coach says, or the CEO in business world says, this is our vision, this is where we're going, and like you'll just have to do it. Sometimes, like we call them leadership groups, and we're real strategic around who we put in that leadership group, and they have to have representation of the diversity of the wider group. And then they often, so it might look like the head coach or the coaching group presents to the leadership group, and then they have their opportunity to bring it to life, test thinking, challenge it, consult on it before it gets presented to the actual full team. So we call that system, we always have what's called the meeting before the meeting. So before any big team meetings where like we might be presenting big game plans, so in the business field that would be new strategies, or there's a lot of consultation and meetings before the meetings with critical people who we know are influential in the group. And then once we have their buy-in, and they get their buy-in because they have a chance to actually feed in, it's really easy to present to the whole group, and then you've got your allies and you've got your leaders, and that goes back to that co-design piece. Like if you're going to build a vision or a strategic direction or a mission, if it's co-designed with your key people, because I think that's the other piece is you put a group of humans together in any shape or form, a culture will be created without anyone trying, and people will try to figure out who the alpha is, who the water carriers are, who are the yes people, who are the people that are going to who are the people that are more sensitive. That it naturally happens through human behaviour, and research has proved that time and time again. I think though what you can do, which is really good if you're aware of this as a leader, you can be really explicit to role model good behaviours and enable or accelerate groups to function in a really good way. So I suppose that's the question for lots of business owners or leaders is if you've got a group, five or more or three or more, then how do you accelerate them to function at a really high level? And that takes time.
I want to go back a couple of steps because I think like the fact that you gave the example of the co-coach coming into you in the hotel and asking, hey, how clear are the players on the vision? I think that's an uncommon question in business. I don't think we ask that question often. Like, hey, firstly, what is the vision? Secondly, how clear are the team on the vision?
It's funny you say that because probably there'll be like critical people that know it within the organisation, like maybe the board knows it plus the CEO, but you're right, the people actually on the ground doing a lot of the bringing it to life, do they know it? The saying that I love for that, which always helps, is a good reality check is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you've got a thriving culture, going back to what I was talking about earlier, if you put a group of humans together, they'll naturally form their own culture. So if you put a group of salespeople together and they create their own great culture, you could have no strategy, but I guarantee they'll be selling your product real well. Don't get me wrong, if you get a great strategy with a great culture, then obviously that's the recipe for greatness. But often I think we focus the other way. It's let's get the strategy right, let's get the vision on paper right, all that stuff. But then actually we haven't worked with all the people in our group or our organisation for them to understand what we're trying to achieve. So there's always like that misalignment. So we've got a client who was sort of lamenting who's also involved in high performance sport, and he was just saying it is one of the distinctions that he
notices or subtleties that he notices in the difference between business and sport is that the average worker isn't necessarily as passionate about their craft as a professional athlete or a semi-professional athlete or even an amateur athlete to a degree.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. That often gets brought up. So like in sport, well, in my luxury, we have athletes who are obviously super passionate about what they do because it's, for some of them, it's the love of their life. I think though the one thing that I would say on that is humans are humans, Because we still have to work with athletes who, they've got a life, so they've got a family, they want a career outside of their rugby. So for them, sometimes life actually does become quite like, I'm not going to say overwhelming, that's definitely not the right term, but their motivation definitely fluctuates in terms of how motivated am I today to be like, because in high performance sport, the biggest challenge is every day you show up, it's how do we get better? So the next day, how do we get better? The next day, how do we get better? So like that in itself can take...
That's exhausting.
That's exhausting because it's, like when you get on grass, everything's filmed. So, how can we be better here? So we often talk a lot around like the 80-20 model, which helps to enable people to understand like that they belong in our environment or in this environment because there's 100% of who you are and 80% of what you do will be instinctive. And the reason that you were selected to be in here in the first place is based off that 80%. And there'll be 20% of who you are as a human and a rugby player that we want to grow and develop. But where we want to put our attention, keyword being attention, is in your 80s. Because if we only invest in your 20s, we're going to see really small margins of improvement. But if we focus on what you're great at already, how do we make it greater? And I think that helps to let athletes know, one, why are they here? So why have they been invited to the environment to start with? And I think you could do the similar mindset with a lot of workplaces in terms of, because everyone's a person again as well, and everyone's got different personalities, and their personality will add to the organisation in any way. So like they might be a really enthusiastic person, or they might be a shy person that comes across as a great listener. So how do we understand what people's strengths are, regardless of what their role is, and then help enable them? But I can definitely empathise with, it would be harder potentially to motivate people. But again, how much time do we invest in people to understand what is their motivation for the job, whether they are the cleaner or the janitor or the greens person or the middle manager or the CEO. So what's their motivation for the job to start with? And then the more we know about them in terms of who they are and what motivates them, then we can actually support them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like you said, it's again just for the context is important for anyone to perform at a high level, right? I have to understand what is it that I'm doing that you want me to do firstly, but arguably more importantly, why is it that you want me to do this?
Yeah, and I reckon one of the greatest learnings I had around that, like as an exterior plasterer, like one of the things that my boss was really big on was always asking me like, what am I doing to save money? So
interesting. He
could see that obviously I was young.
Yeah.
Like saving wasn't big. So he was really big on like testing me, giving me books to read around like, have you read this book around hey, you might better buy your first vehicle properly, or have you thought about you can invest money in here? And so for a 19-year-old, that was someone I was obviously working for that person as an exterior plasterer, but he was actually looking...
He's invested in your...
Yeah, he was like, mate, you're more than just a plasterer, like I want to see you succeed, so it'd be great to watch you buy your first house, and the earlier you can get on his biggest thing was the earlier you get on the property ladder, the more you're going to set yourself up for life, so... And for a 19-year-old, I probably did have the opportunity to learn that stuff at school, but maybe didn't listen. Whereas when I was now working with this person, and so we would spend days together working with each other, and he was always supporting and testing my thinking around in a really positive way. So that's another example that motivated me to work harder for that boss because he was giving me knowledge that I didn't have. That was nothing to do with plastering. It was just purely to do with how I can get ahead in life. So I think those are little subtleties that as leaders, which isn't hard, right? Like that boss had a really nice house. I think he had 2 houses to be fair. He had his own business. And he was young once too. So he was basically just sharing life lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's how you can increase motivation because people need to know that you care, right? If they know you're there and they know you care, then they will work hard for you. If you're a boss that is, yelling at people, or you only reward people that hit all their KPIs, and there's a monthly target on the board, like that's going to get some form of motivation for the really ambitious people. But the people actually want to feel as though they belong to something. Those are the ones that you want to show the care to.
Yeah, it's interesting when you kind of step back for a second, and I think maybe people have picked up on this or maybe they haven't, but effectively what you're talking about is your mindset around your group. And what you're saying is, my first priority is that I want to prioritize the person.
Yes.
And I want to connect our organizational vision or our team vision and goals and culture with you personally. I want it to matter to you, and I want you to matter. I want you to know that I know that you matter.
Totally.
Which is kind of, if I was to be so bold, the opposite of what people perhaps perceive high performance sport to be, in the sense of, you watch NBA teams, and I just saw a video the other day of live reactions when people know they find out they're getting traded.
Oh, yes.
And they had Isaiah,
Thomas, is it?
Isaiah Thomas, the little short Celtics player that blew out his knee. His sister died in a car crash, and he still played, just absolutely destroyed his knee in those finals, trying to get Boston to the final. I think it was at Eastern Conference semi-finals, and then
he's getting traded,
and then he gets traded.
That's so interesting, because on the American system, and I do laugh, or I don't laugh, I find it challenging. One of the biggest things that we're having conversations with at the moment, me and actually it was the mental skills coach recently actually, but we were talking around human resources. So it's a lot of human resources exist in businesses now, and that's great. And part of their job is obviously like supporting, part of their role is building capability, enabling leadership, building leadership capability, helping them understand. One of the things which I think we get wrong is, the title of HR is, human first, and the title, and then resources. But often where we land a lot of the time, because it's so much cleaner when we make decisions, is we talk around the resources. So like, what does the contract say? What's the dollars and cents attached to what that person does for us from a resource point of view? So it's always like quite black and white, because that's really easy as a human. It makes us feel good when we make black and white decisions, because then it seems fair and equal. But actually, if we put the human first, so in Isaiah's point, it's like, well, if we looked at him as a human, like, what's going on in his life? If we actually knew him, geez, that's pretty tough. Like, how are we going to deal with that? Let's actually have a conversation about that first. Don't get me wrong, you have to have the resourcing conversation, because there's still the business component around the dollars and cents. But if we actually dealt with the human first, which takes a lot more time, we'd probably have people that are more happy in the organisation that they work for. But often when the pressure comes on, often I think that's where people just fold back to, well, what did the paperwork say? Or what does it say legally to do here? Right? Because if we dealt with the human, then everything has to be case by case, which means that, yes, that could look like unfairness, but I think what we need to think about is, like, what's the equality of this? So if person A and person B, because every human's different, have two different stories, then we should treat them with two different stories. We shouldn't give them the same treatment based off what their contract says, because they're two different people. So I think it takes real bravery to be that flexible in your thinking, because one, you open yourself up because you might get challenged. And then when you get challenged, you might not have an answer. So that's another part of leadership, I think, that I've learned coaching is, like, how do you show vulnerability that actually you don't have all the answers, which you hear a lot. But I'll never forget a training session that I did when I'd just been invited to the New Zealand Sevens team, to the development team. I think we had 6 full-time contracted players who came down to this team, and then we had 6 kind of like, promising players, and we were in training camp. It was like day 2, and I started coaching this certain technique that I thought was like the current technique that was getting coached. And one of the contracted Black Ferns turns around to me and goes, "We don't coach it like that anymore." In the middle of a training session, and I was thinking to myself, "Oh, really? Oh." And all I did was I just paused, and I was like, "Oh, can you just talk to the group around what is it that is technically this, the best practice way that you're currently getting coached at the Black Ferns level?" And she did, sure enough. But I think that's an example of how it could have gone wrong, right? I could have gone, no, like, you just do it this way because I'm the coach and you just need to do as I say. But if you open yourself up to be like, I don't have all the answers, and for us to be successful, actually, I need your input. So thanks for actually being brave enough to actually say to me, hey, coach, just so you're clear, even though it's your first day here, that's actually not the correct way we're coaching it these days.
Yeah. It's a great example of in that moment, the outcomes could have taken two completely different paths based on your response in that moment. And yeah, it does really take bravery to be like, hey, I don't know. you take the lead on this one.
Yeah, it's like, can you just show me what that actually looks like? Because I'm unsure what you're talking about. And then you can frame it up to make yourself look like, you can be like, oh, you've actually just taught me something there. Like, So again, it's a relationship, because I think I spoke about this at the last workshop we did with some the businesses. But the two questions that anyone asks themselves is, am I safe and do we have a future together? So if I got closed off in that environment, in a new interaction, in a relationship, that's the future. So that player would have then gone, I don't think we've got a future together, because I can't actually tell you stuff because you got really defensive. Whereas by me opening myself up to say, actually, that's really cool. I think I've just learned something from you. Can you actually show the group what you're talking about? Now there's actually a relationship that shows we actually have a future together because I'm willing to listen to you. And then so there's dual respect, because then if something else pops up where I might have something to say that's technical or tactically where I think it should be what we are doing, then there's an opportunity for us to talk because we've already established that we have a future. Whereas if I'm closed off, e.g., no, I want you to do it like I'm saying you do it, that player goes, oh, well, I don't feel safe because you just shut me down. And two, we don't have a future because you're not listening. So, yeah, little subtleties like that, little moments like that as a leader can go a long way.
Yeah. And I think the challenge when you're in a business context is around the focus is always performance, right? So there's often this moment of freak out where people, or owners rather, are weighing up, do I hire this person or do I not? And then there's the pressure of like, oh, this is a salary that's drawing on my overheads, and is that cutting into my profit, or is it even creating a loss in some instances? And so there's this immediate focus on performance, and that can, and if you expand that out into more, often owners will complain about employees, and it's in that language, it's staff, employees, it's they're effing around, and it can often be quite negative, the chat that I hear back, and I think a lot of that comes because the focus goes on to performance, and rightly so to a degree, but I think oftentimes there is missing that focus on people, and like you said so articulately, people before performance, and I think those two questions there around am I safe and do we have a future, if you asked a lot of owners that question around the staff that they have issues with, I wonder what they might say.
Yeah, that's a
really I wonder how safe that employee is feeling. I wonder if that employee feels like they have a future there.
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things that we've been exploring at the moment too in our environment is we do a lot of work explicitly to try and accelerate the group performance. So like I've talked, building allies, the meeting before the meeting, getting clear on what we're all trying to achieve. But one of the things that I think we've quickly learned is when the group first gets together for us at the start of the season, or at any season, I think one of the greatest things that coaches can do, and the leaders, is just role model the behaviour. So for example, if you're a CEO and you show up, let's say profit and loss ain't looking so good on the spreadsheet. So then for the month, like you're the CEO and you walk straight into the office, straight past everyone and go straight to your office. That role model behaviour is, oh shivers, when we're stressed, we just stop connecting with people. So
good.
The number one trait, again, that we all crave is the sense of belonging or value within the group. We're social people. That's what has allowed cultures to thrive for a long time, and it's what's also cultures that die. So if the leader or the leaders, when the profit or loss gets tight, if their behaviour is we go straight to our offices and then we have serious meetings with glass walls that everyone can see, and we've got whiteboards and graphs, and people read up on body language so well. And that's how we see cultures where people start talking about, geez, is everything all right with the leaders? Or I don't know if I can even approach them about I want to go and ask about maternity leave because, you know what I mean? Like, that's just a quick example because that's probably, we've just got 2 kids at home. But I feel as though if you actually just role model behaviour as a leader, so even if you are stressed, like what are the tools you have in place as a leadership team within any organisation to be like, right, things might be tight, but actually we've got to show that we're calm, we've got a plan, we know where we're going. So when we get in the office, let's make sure we connect with people. Nothing looks like it's out of place. And then the second part of that is if you want to actually bring people in on the journey, so it's co-designed, if you're a business, let people know in a positive way that yes, things are tight and actually this is what we need to go and do. I'm going to be real transparent with you around the support that we all need to bring, rather than having secret meetings that look real stressed and then your behaviour shifts. And then people start saying, man, is everything all right? I'm not even sure, like what's going on in here. Whereas I actually learned that from Mike King. One of the best things he talked around was how do you regulate emotion for your kids? So if you're a father and you come home grumpy after a long day, and if my son, for example, comes up to me and will say, "Oh, how was your day, Dad?" and you're like, "Sure, just shut up, leave me alone, go get a beer." Like, there's, it's kind of, that's me just not even. But if I walk in and my son says to me or my daughter, "Oh, how was your day?" and I say, "Man, it's actually real tough, son. Jeez, it was a hard day, a couple of massive meetings, and probably didn't get what I wanted out of the outcome. So go get me a beer and let's talk about it." You're actually
that's so good.
You're actually like regulating that it's all right to actually show.
It's okay to have a bad day.
Yeah, it's okay to show too that I'm actually frustrated today, son, because it was actually bad. So it's the same in your workplace. If you walk in, like I said, and go straight to your office, you're actually demonstrating to all your staff that actually that's how we deal with stresses. We don't talk about it until it's like the worst of the worst, till we've got to lay people off. Whereas if you have team meetings, to be like, here's really what we're doing. We all need to pitch in and provide support to each other. This is some of the plans that we have. They might have plans and things too, because they're the ones on the ground doing the work. But again, if we're not wanting to be vulnerable as a leader because we think that we have to like hold on to it and do all that, really it actually gives distrust into the leadership group or whatever that looks like. So yeah, so I suppose the 2 messages there, what I'm trying to say is, how do you be vulnerable as a leader to actually like regulate people and make them feel as though they can be part of the solution if your business is in that kind of profit or loss. Because I tell you what, one thing I've definitely noticed with businesses or sports teams, man, when it's going good, they're sharing everything.
Yeah.
The profits are high, this is what this person did this, let's celebrate this person, it's all going good. But it's when it goes low that we keep the chips closer to us.
Yeah.
And we just... Again, it actually just puts all this weight on our shoulders. When actually, if we shared the problem, there's a cool book from that I read my son. It's a kid's book. It's like the horse, the mole, the boy, and the fox. I don't know if you've read it.
I have not read it.
It's one of the pages. It's got some real cool philosophical little like quotes. One of the coolest things. It's like it's a picture of the horse and the boy, and it's like, "What's the bravest thing you've ever said?" The boy said to the horse, and the horse said, "Help." And I was like, that's so true. Like when we're as a leader, when we're in these roles of responsibility around decision making, like how often do we actually just ask for help to be like, shivers, this is what's happening, and you'll find that it's actually like humans weren't meant, we're not designed, again that's why we're social, we're not designed to hold on to emotion. We were designed to like let other people know what's going on in our life, and the more we hold on to it, like the more it just like boils up and we stop being actually who we are. So I suppose that as a leader with a high stress environment is actually what do you have in your life to actually regulate that emotion and talk to someone about it. So yeah, food for thought.
A lot of food for thought there. Yeah,
bit going on there.
There's just a couple of strands there we could pick up on. Yeah, I mean I think like you said, and I think there'll be people listening to this and going just chuckling to themselves because that is exactly what they do. And I just think over my working career, I worked in some businesses with amazing culture, and equally worked in some businesses with culture that wasn't so great. And I remember one manager I had in particular, Jeff. He was this Australian from Melbourne when I was in the automotive industry, and he used to walk, every time he would walk into the building, he would shake every single person's hand. Awesome. And and he would just say, "Good morning, so-and-so," and just give you a real firm shake of the hand. And he had, the other thing he did, he had mints on his table in his office. And so everyone would just be in and out, just grabbing a mint. But it was a real interesting exercise in human connection, because that little act of just shaking a hand completely transforms the energy in the space. And as you said, if you contrast that, even brief as it is, just the shake of the hand, brief as that is, compare that to when the boss just walks straight into their office, head, eyes on the floor, just they're on a mission.
That's right.
You know that nothing's good's going to come out of
and
that.
Again, that's such a good example. That boss sounds awesome. One of the things that the Crusaders do well, which is that they do the fist pump every time you walk into if you haven't seen someone for the day. So whether it's the receptionist or the CEO, like if you're walking past them in the hallway and you haven't seen them for the day, or you're walking past their office, you've got to quickly go in. And like you say, it literally has things, quick little fist pump, and then move on for your day. But you're right. I think one of the things that it just creates, going back to the, do you have a future together? You know, if the boss does what you said, beelines head down straight to their office, probably most people that see that are going to go, don't know if I've got a future with that person today, because they look on a mission. Whereas if that boss that you're talking about coming around shaking everyone's hand, if you're a worker in that environment, you're going, man, I've got a future with that boss, because one, he knows my name, or she knows my name, and they've just given me like 5 seconds of their time. Yeah. So it means that they care. So it's really interesting how something that simple can, I would hope that that boss that you did have was doing that almost explicitly because they knew the value of it.
I think he did. Yeah. I think it was a little bit of a cultural thing, or he'd probably picked it up himself somewhere along the way. But it was so meaningful, and it's actually something we do in our business now. Is we always greet each other with a handshake and a.
It's so cool.
Hey, and it can just be just quick between like. I'm on my way to my office, and it's just 100%. With a quick handshake, and that's we do the same thing when we start a coaching session for that same reason. I'll just greet people and I'll shake their hand. And then the other thing that we do is we have a whiffle, which is what I feel like expressing, and it's awesome. It's a rhythm that we start every session with, we start every team meeting with, but we do it for two reasons. One, because when you're talking, you're present. Yes. When you're not talking, you can often be somewhere else. Yeah, totally. And so if you are just sitting in a meeting, not talking the entire time, your head is somewhere else and your heart's somewhere else. And so when you use this tool called a whiffle, it's the way we do it is very deliberate. Yes. So it starts with what I feel like expressing is, and then you say what you feel like expressing, whatever that might be, and you finish with, and that's what I feel like expressing. Mate. And then you invite the next person to share by saying, so cool. Jimmy, what do you feel like expressing? Yeah, that's freaking awesome. And it not only does it make the meeting cleaner, because the meeting obviously has a clear start when we're whiffling, the meeting started. Yes. But also people get a chance to share whatever's on their heart, and that might be a big thing, a little thing. That's outstanding. And going back to creating a safe environment, going back to, humans aren't designed to hold on to emotion. So just by having that little system in place to be like, the whiffle, it's like, what am I feeling right now? It could be something to do with work, could be nothing to do with work, could be, if it's me, I'm rocking on like 2 hours sleep, like with 2 kids under the age of 2. So yeah, exactly. It's like, but by allowing that safe space to be like, just share what are you feeling right now? Straight away, the meeting starts with like, man, these people actually like allowed me to just talk about something. That might be to do with work, or it might not be, but it's just allowing that opportunity. It's allowing that space, which is an awesome example. Right? I think that's such a practical example around. It doesn't, when we talk around creating safe cultures or quality environments, it really can be as simple as little things like that can make a massive difference. And the sad thing, or I think the hardest thing, is breaking some traditional thinking. So if you have always worked in an environment where every work meeting is just, there's an agenda set, you start at agenda 1, item 1, boom, go, and it's all tactical conversations or strategic conversations, that can be quite hard to shift your own thinking. To be like, because it feels quite awkward when you start
sharing emotion in a team meeting. But like you say, it would take less than 5 minutes.
Well, it is awkward the first time you do it.
Oh, definitely.
And anything, the more you repeat that behaviour, the easier it becomes.
It just becomes normal.
And I think, like you said, there's that tendency in business to go, I just have those lyrics of the song, let's get down to business. I don't want to around, what is this? In the back of my head.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think that is how we often start off meetings is, right, let's get down to business.
Huge.
But in doing so, we often we ignore the humans in the room, and we actually fail to connect with them, and then therefore the meeting doesn't go as well as we expected, because people are craving that human connection.
100%. I totally agree. And then I think what people need to understand, because you'll always have your personalities that just want to get down to business.
For sure.
So
I'm one of them.
So it's like, okay, team, when it's framed to the leader, it's like, I just want to try something as an opportunity for us to connect as a group. One of the cool things we've tried recently, which is a different tack but similar, is before we start rugby training, sometimes if there's a sense of the energy in the group around that, it might be like the end of the week, so like they've spent all week trying to get better and it's been challenging, I might just start a session off with gratitude. And it's like, go and talk to someone you haven't maybe spent so much time with this week, one thing you're grateful for today, and then everyone shares back the other person's, so it shows that kind of ability to listen to others.
Yeah, nice.
And then straight away, I've always found that the correlation, I could be biased, but I've always found those sessions that start with that, there's always, in particular with the way the session starts, once we actually start getting into training, there's certainly just a better connection.
Yeah.
And you can hear it with the group. There's more laughter, there's more conversations between different people. And just naturally, by opening up and being like, we're all human here, so things might not be going real smooth in everyone's life. Some people might be having the best time of their life. So let's just get to know each other. And then what it does when people say things like, I'm grateful that my mum flew up from Southland. And people are like, oh, so is you from... So again, it creates that cross-pollination of connection. Like, oh, you're from Southland? I didn't even know that. It's like, yeah, I am from Southland, yeah. And then someone might say, oh, I'm grateful that university's finished for the year. And this one's like, oh, shit, I didn't even know you were studying. And we've been playing in the same team for like 3 months. So doing little things like that, again, is another simple tool that enables connection. Again, that's that kind of like, I suppose you'd call it hiding the vegetables in the cheese sauce. So
I mean, as you're saying that, I was just thinking like, yeah, you're right. When you, even, and we know this with our kids as well, right? If our kids feel that they are safe and secure, then they'll take on the feedback much more willingly than if they feel the relationship's at threat.
Oh, massively.
And just thinking about I've not really been in a high performance sport environment, but I've been in environments where people really, sporting environments where it mattered a lot to the people that were playing. And in their minds, it was high performance. And so, even though it was not really. And some of the feedback got pretty prickly.
Yeah.
And the expectations were clear, but because there wasn't that connection, people get their back up, and it's like all of a sudden it becomes become a negative and toxic thing, and actually have the opposite effect. Yes. So I think oftentimes when we're giving feedback, we're like, well, I'll just give the feedback because they need to hear it. Well, it's got to be something, someone's got to say something, it's got to be said.
Yes.
And then we use that line, it's just business. And
so
actually we completely balls it up because the person's not hearing much of what you're actually saying because they don't feel truly...
Yeah, 100%. And I think, like a really good example of that in sport is deselection meetings, so where you're having to tell players that they're not going to be playing.
Yeah, right.
That'd probably be one of the hardest parts of high-performance sport is because the people that are often there care so much.
Yes.
They invest a whole lot of their life into it. So when they get an injury or they haven't performed as well as another player, trying to have those conversations are really, really difficult. And the communication that exists within those needs to be dealt with really well. But again, if you know the player really well as a person, so there'll be players that I know based off who they are and their personality, they don't want it fluffy. Just, mate, if you've called a meeting with me 101, I know what it is, so just hit me between the eyes and we can talk about it later. And then there'll be players that will want to talk about it, they'll want time to process it. Yeah, so we've trialled all sorts of stuff around, like we've trialled more of a, frame the meeting up to be like, I'm going to tell you something from a place of care. decisions for the team, but all the player hears is, mate,
you're not making, you didn't make it.
Yeah, so one of the things which our mental skills coach has done some research on herself, which is cool, is the whole like feedback sandwich thing when it comes to giving someone feedback. The whole piece of building trust, or one of the key pillars, is around like benevolence, so like being honest. So if you go in and you try to sugarcoat something with, say, that sandwich model, it's like, oh, we're really loving the way you're doing this, but also we're loving the way you're doing this. There's a couple of things. Short-term memory, so people only remember the last thing that was said to them.
Yeah. Recency effect.
And that model was a positive. And people think, going back to, am I safe, do we have a future together? If you lie, or you try to sugarcoat something when you've called a one-on-one meeting, humans are really smart, so they can read body language like before you've even opened your mouth. So they'll know deep down by the way that the coach is presenting or the management member is presenting that they're going to get some news they don't like. It's actually better to just start with, I really care about you, I've got some bad news, and here it is. And then once you give them that, players will be able to take the feedback there and then, and other players that won't be ready to receive the feedback 2 weeks' time. Around like, why was that decision made? What was the logic behind it? But again, the key bit is like, you want them to know that you're there and that you care still. So the conversation we try, and we definitely don't get this right because all the time, like, players react and then you just have to deal with what's in front of it. But, the biggest thing we try to let them know is like, here's the reasons why. So we try to be straight up from the first front. And then, but look, we're here and here's some stuff that we can help with to help get you where you want to be. And then that puts the empowerment on the player because it's saying, I'm here to support you. Here's where I'm available. So I'm there and I still care. And then it's up to the player if they want to take that next step and engage in that, then 100% they know that we're there. But at the same time, it's really hard, those kind of feedback conversations or those sensitive conversations when you're dealing with someone in that space can be really, really tough, which I'm sure would be the same in the business world when you're dealing with performance issues and you're trying to navigate that.
I was just thinking about that. Ironically, in business, I think often performance management as a negative, it's a punitive term.
Yeah, it is.
What?
yeah, you're right. And then, I actually, that's a really good point. I'd love to know how that exists when you're trying to deal with, because like you say, performance plans, or for people are often it's used, when someone's on a performance plan, it's often because people are trying to like restructure them out, or they're trying to find times where they're not performing. So
exactly.
So then they've got a plan. Going back to HR, so the word humans in there, but the resources are, okay, so the system we're going to put in place is they're on this plan, they have to report to me every week, and then but really what we're saying to them is we're looking for any opportunity to prove that you're not doing what you said you were doing, and then we're going to ask you to either, which I think is really sad. I think when it goes back to it, like if you use the 80-20 model as a way that you grow your people, if you hired someone originally, they obviously had something that you liked, whether it was just something in the interview or whatever. There was something that they liked. They might have been super charismatic, but not well planned. There was something that caught your attention as to why you hired them. So 5 years later, all of a sudden you now got them on a performance plan because they aren't doing what you asked. That person that you hired 5 years ago still exists. And it's actually your job, because their story will still be there, of how they grew up, how they became to be who they are today. But if something in their life's changed, and yes, they might not be performing like you said, it'll be because something in their life has changed. And that's why you've got to get to know them, because then you can actually help them get back to what they were. The best boss I ever had, honestly, his statement that he used to use with me all the time was literally, your strength is connection and getting in front of people to help them be better. So my role is to give you more opportunity to do that and take away the parts of your job that you might not be that good at. And that's about performance. But what he's trying to say is your personality is X, so let's create an environment where that personality gets to the forefront, which is the 80-20 model. And the 20% of stuff that you might not be so good at, let me take care of some of that stuff. And then that's going to enable you to be at your best. Whereas the opposite mindset could be like, oh, that person, if we use the 20 model rather than looking at the 80s, someone could be like, oh, that person, Jimmy's not doing this and he's not doing that. He needs to be better here, blah, blah, blah. Which is forgetting about like, well, what did we hire the person in the job? And how do we work with people's strengths? That's where I feel as though that's where you really get the great stuff out of people, is when you enhance their strengths, or you've got a strengths-based approach. Because again, that makes them feel valued. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I totally agree. I think if you know what somebody's strengths are and you can dial the volume up on those. And I think with the weaknesses, though, one distinction I would make is, and this is my issue with things like StrengthsFinder, is that if you think about an elite rugby player,
yes,
if they have a weakness,
yes,
you don't just go, "Hey, all good, bro. You can't tackle." Look, you just focus on running the ball. Don't worry about tackling. You don't do that. You go like, mate, you've got to at least do the basics.
Yes,
like, you don't need to be, the best tackler in the world.
No.
But we do need you to be able to
agree.
take someone down if it comes down to it.
100%.
And I think sometimes we get a little bit taken by that idea that, hey, I could just only do the things I'm good at.
Yeah. No, that's
like
right.
my son right now, he's super charming, super lovely, but he just doesn't like hard work. And any excuse he can find to not wash his bowl. He even said to me today, he's like, "Do I always have to put the bowl in the dishwasher?" Yeah, mate. Like, unfortunately, that's just part of being in this team. Yeah. Like, we all take care of our bowls once we're finished with them.
Yeah, you've just had a real good point there, which I forget. Another philosophy that we use all the time in high performance sport is, well, personally we use it, is behaviour goes where recognition flows. So for example, if there's a player that's 80% great at something, let's say it could be tackling, but they might not be so good at passing, to just put it in real simple terms. So I might give them some feedback around, like, I might pump them up. Hey mate, loving the way you're tackling, it looks really great. You're accelerating into contact, love it. So that's recognition. So they're going to keep doing that behaviour. Mm-hmm. But then I might say, look, I'd love you to start working on your passing a little bit. I've noticed that there's an opportunity to grow your game if we go here, rather than your passing shit.
Yeah,
excuse my language. And here's what we need to do to get better. So I've noticed this part of your game. We could really improve it. So that's a different way to frame it. So then when I start seeing that little shifts in their behaviour with the passing, I might just make a couple of comments as I walk past them and train, being like, "Oh, I'm loving the way you're getting your elbow up on your pass now," or "I'm loving the way you're getting your fingers to the ball now early." So straight away, rather than saying your passing's no good, I've said, I've noticed a part of your game we could grow to make you better.
Yeah.
And then every time I see it, I'm giving that recognition. So their behaviour is naturally going to slowly shift to be like, whereas I find often when it comes to high performance sport or business world, or leaders in general, it's like, "Oh, they're not doing this well." One of the worst comments that when I hear coaches say this is, "Oh, that player can't do this." I'm like, you do realise that your job as a coach is to coach them?
Yeah.
Like, if they're in your group, they were there for a reason to start with.
Yeah.
And when
that's your job.
When you make a comment to be like, "Oh, they can't do that," and it's like, yeah, that's why your job is to make them better. That's part of the definition. I think that's part of the definition of whether you're a leader, a CEO, whatever world. If you work in a place where there's more than one of you, so there's group dynamics, and you are classed as a leader in that environment, the business owner or whatever, it's your job to improve that person in terms of... And like I said, that's why I say person, not performer, because... Like I said, with that boss with the exterior plastering, like, he improved my ability to understand how to use money, which I never learned growing up. So that was his way of growing me, because he thought that would help me in life. So again, it's that whole... But like I said, because he did that, when he would talk to me about how to use the trowel, I'd be engaged, because I'm like, well, you actually are helping me out here on more than just how to put this plaster on this wall. You're helping me to understand life a bit more. So again,
that's really interesting.
I just think, again, it's that optimistic mindset compared to pessimistic.
Yeah. And imagine if every boss, every business owner, leader had that mindset of like, what does this person need in life, and how could I be the gift that they need in that area 100%. Right now?
And I think it goes back to like even if you're a listener, one of the greatest questions you can ask yourself if you're in a leadership role is, think of the best leader you ever had and what made them great, or how would you define them? It'll never be, the answer that you give to that will never be, "Oh, they were the greatest strategic planner," or "Man, they were just so good at using Excel spreadsheets. They just knew exactly what they had to do and all the calculations." It'll be things around, "Man, they made me feel valued, man, and they gave me the time of day like your boss. They shook my hand every day. They made me feel as though I was included. They gave me a voice to share my opinion. They shared knowledge with me that I never had about how to look after myself," or they gave me advice about how to be a dad, because, so there's, which is all caring. It's nothing to do with the technical and tactical, but yet I feel as though where do we invest a lot of our time is obviously we want to get better at things technically and tactically. So if you're in the business world, of course you want to learn to understand finances and marketing strategies, but what you need to also keep investing in yourself is literally investing in yourself to understand who you are as a leader, and then how is that going to impact on the group.
Yeah, I want to touch on that first for a moment. Actually, I'm going to go somewhere else first, and I'm going to come back to that because I think that is a really great question. Is okay. Well, let's say I'm listening to Jimmy talk, and I'm like, yeah, this is really good. Yeah, I want to do this. I can see the value of it. What are some of the things that they can do? Like the quick, I don't want to call them quick wins or cheat codes because I don't think there's such a thing. But where would you start in building culture? Because I know that's something that you're passionate about. But let's just talk for a moment in terms of your skills and what you think makes you a great coach and leader.
I don't know if I would say I'm a great coach. I'm a learning coach, I'd say at the moment. But I'd say, in a leader, I think, that's a good question. I think if I was to say what's one of my superpowers or one of my habits that I really pride myself on, it would be optimism. I think one of the biggest strengths I have is if people come to me with negative information or pessimistic views, my biggest strength is trying to turn that around with well, what's the solution then, or what's the opportunity we have to grow? And I think a lot of that stems from where that's helped me is honestly the earlier years after university, being an exterior plasterer, just gave me such insight into what my life could be like versus what I made it. So if I didn't work hard to understand that and be optimistic about, so with schooling, I never passed school. So going to university to begin with was daunting. So the optimistic mindset to be, okay, well, what can I get out of university and how hard will I have to work and is it actually possible? Well, of course it is, because if I'm passionate about it, I'll make it work. So I think that in itself, probably the optimism piece. And then I think one of the strongest things that's helped me grow, which a great friend Blair Baxter helped me gain, is as a leader, what are your anchors? What are your non-negotiables about the way you want to behave that never shift no matter the people you lead? And if the analogy I use there is the price of a water bottle from Caltex to Countdown to New World to anywhere changes. So if these anchors aren't aligning with the environment you're in, change your location. So if you go to different locations, the price of water is different. So if you're not feeling valued, go somewhere else. So these three values that I try to live by allow me to feel valued. So if I feel that I'm living these, then regardless of who I'm in front of or who I'm leading, I feel as though I'm getting fulfillment. So and this helped me grow my leadership so much, is the three anchors I use are passion, collaboration and curiosity. So if someone says to me, mate, I've got this group, we'd be interested in for you to come and coach, those are the first things that I'll ask myself is, am I passionate about this group? If the answer is yes, then I'll explore. Am I curious about where they could end up or curious about how it's going to grow me personally? Then let's go there. And is there opportunity to collaborate? Are the people that are already existing in this space, do I see myself actually collaborating with them? So if any of those answers are no, then I want to explore that.
Yeah, I love that.
So that's why when this opportunity came up, or when any opportunities come up in the past, and those anchors have helped me to say no to certain things over the last few years, to say, actually, especially now having a family, I think that's one of the draw cards is when someone asks me, can I help this situation or this group? If it's not passionate because it's going to take me time away from family, sometimes my answer will be no, sorry, I just don't have time to do that right now. Because actually the passion I have right now is somewhere else. And I know because I've felt it when I agree to do stuff, but I'm not truly passionate about it. I don't put my best foot forward and I don't do it properly. So I think getting really clear on those anchors, which again, I suppose going back to what do I think's allowed me or enabled me to work in some privileged spaces, is having self-awareness. And then actually the key bit that I always talk to people is self-awareness is the starting point. So me being aware of those anchors and me being aware of my personality around being enthusiastic, I like to connect with people, I want to help people, I'm passionate about that space. But my strategic awareness is where things are really, where the rubber hits the road. So if I said to you, let's say I said I've got an eating problem, So that's admitting it. I go to McDonald's every day. If my route home drives past a McDonald's and a KFC, and I keep driving that same route, all I've done is admit that I'm aware, but I haven't strategically shifted anything. So the strategic piece is, mate, there's an alternative route down a couple of back streets. You won't have to drive past those places anymore. Or actually get a bike, start biking to work, and go past a different way. So that's the strategic piece. So for me, for example, an example of that is I'm really adaptable, and I like to think in a up and down motion. I don't see plan A goes to B. I'll go to Z to go to B, and that's just how my brain works. So in front of a group, I'm really adaptable. Things change, boom, let's coach this now because I can see that's an issue. So some people call that a strength, other people call that a weakness.
Yeah.
So, but again, my strategic piece of that is I actually have to carve out time in the week where I'm dedicated to planning, to give other people that I lead clarity.
Yes.
And when I don't do that, that's when I get 100 questions coming my way from people being like, what's the plan for this? What's the plan for that? And in my head, I've got it in my head, but it's not down on paper for people to be real clear. And that's an ever-growing, like I would not sit here and honestly and say, I nail that every week. But when I do nail that in terms of the week, when I'm really well planned and I've carved out the time early in the week to get good clarity around what we're trying to achieve within this working week or this month, things always sail smooth. And the habit when that drops, when I get busy or I run out of time to plan, is when I go back to what I said some people call a strength, some people call a weakness. So I think, if you're self-aware, so you understand that to begin with, and then the second question is, what's the tool? So for me, the strategic tool was carve out 2 hours in the week at the start of it, on a Monday or Tuesday, where you can plan out your whole week around whatever you're looking to achieve, and then you're really clear. And then the strength of that, going back to the strengths approach, is I've still got that natural personality ability to be adaptable. So if the plan says A, but you needed to move to Z, that's fine, because at least you had the plan to start with. But if I've got no plan, then my personality goes all over the place. So I think, that would be my second part, is you become self-aware to start with around who you are, what's your personality, how is your personality formed, what are your beliefs on the way the world is, and that forms how you behave. And then once you understand how you behave, what are the strengths of that, what are the weaknesses, well, what are the tools I need to put in place to actually help me thrive, would probably be the piece that I think's genuinely helped me become you only have to ask my wife that, you get a better story there, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'd all get a better story if we asked each other's wives, right? Yeah, I think that's really cool, and I totally agree. I think self-awareness, just because you can articulate what it is that you're feeling or how you tend to respond, doesn't mean that you're self-aware.
No, that's exactly right.
Or it's kind of not the point, right? It's not. The point is that you know and you adapt.
That's exactly right. And I think that's where, people lose trust in leaders too, when leaders start making comments around, but I'm just a big picture thinker, that's just who I am, as a passive joke. And don't get me wrong, that's all right to admit again that you have the problem, but what are you actually doing to try and be better? And no one's expecting you to all of a sudden flip your personality overnight. And the quote that I use there is, who you are is how you lead, whether you like it or not. So no leadership is the same, and so no leadership style is the same. The number one thing that dictates how you should lead is the context in front of you. So I think where people lose it, though, is you don't have to chase perfection. It's just slowly shifting. Can I actually shift my behaviour a little bit to be better today?
Yes.
And that's all that people want to see. No one's expecting you to change your personality overnight. And then again, it's about skillfully being yourself. So if you are a big sky thinker, when the opportunity arises itself, make sure you own that. Be the person with the crazy out there ideas, because that's what makes you great. So, that would be my advice there.
Yeah, I like that. Skillfully being yourself. That's a great wee line. Yeah, I think when identity becomes fixed and binary like that, like I am this and I am not that.
Yes.
You just create a noose for your own neck, because
that's right.
Okay, well, if you're that, then I'm never going to ask you for anything that's not that.
That's exactly right.
Because you've made it explicit to everyone that you're not that.
That's
but
so
one of the things we know from research is that people change over time. Their views, your political views, as you get older, tend to become more conservative.
Yeah, totally.
It's part of being a human being is you are not fixed, you're not static, and you can change. Yes, you will have. We all come out of the womb with temperament, a temperament being a particular way, but that temperament can be nurtured over time
totally.
to be
I love that.
more dominant or less dominant. And so I might have a tendency. I like that word. I have a tendency to do this.
That's good.
But that tendency might be a helpful. Every behaviour can have a positive and a negative effect. It just depends on the context.
Yeah. 100%.
So when I say I'm this, full stop.
Yes.
And I'm, as opposed to me saying, well, I tend to be this, but I'm working on this, I'm working on this is more positive.
That's awesome language.
Then I open myself and the world up around me. And I just think with behaviours, I like to think of them like a mixing desk, right? There's all these dials, and I can dial them up or down. I have the ability to do that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
No one else has the ability to do that for me, but I have the ability to do that for myself.
Yeah.
And some of them have been dialed up pretty high and have this lock point where I can't, like, no matter how hard I try, I can't turn them down past that point, or I don't want to.
Yes.
But yeah, I like to think of, but I like the frame that you had around thinking of them as opportunities. Like, hey, well, and one of the things that we do when we do behavioural mapping with people is around that. Is like, okay, well, if you're in this situation and you're making decisions and you started considering this information, this data, or you started asking this question, like for you, yes. You know, if you're really high visionary and highly flexible, and you started introducing some planning time, what might the impact be? And you know that, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But
Totally.
It's because the impact you've seen is like, I'm a better coach because I've considered this information that I perhaps wasn't considering before.
100%. And then, I totally agree. I think that's awesome. Like, and it's funny because I reckon the people you lead, they get to know what your strengths are really well and what your weaknesses are. So it'll become like a running joke now. Like if I decide as a coach to go off the cusp in a training session, players that are similar to my personality and I love the adaptation to me. And then other ones might be like, oh, he's going off a bit rogue again today. So like that's again like just I think though when you get to that level where there can actually be genuine conversation about people's personalities playing out in the workplace. In a like a really good-hearted way, not a someone self-proclaiming that like, oh, that's just who I am, so you just need to accept it. I think that shows that you're in a safe space in terms of people understand that we're all different, but if we all know where we're going back to what we talked about at the very start, that's how you get really good, I suppose, common work in terms of the people who are really motivated to be there. Yeah, that's great. Let's touch back on that question around, okay, if you want to do some things that if you're a leader and you're listening to this and you are going, yep, this is all sounding great. Like, what do I do, Jimmy? Just tell me what I got to do. Yeah. That's awesome.
What are some of the things that you'd be like, okay, 1, 2, 3.
The first thing I'd do if you were a leader and you had an organisation or your business is get like the 5 people or whoever, get a group of people, could be like 3 to 5 that you think you trust a lot. And just put up whatever your vision is currently, and just literally, are we all clear on this vision? Have a group conversation that's co-designed, and that's the first place I'd start. Is like, are we actually all clear on what we're all trying to achieve? And straight away, if you get misalignment, one person thinks it's this, one person thinks it's that. Great, what a place to start! What an opportunity we have to now share where we think we need to go. And then the second part of that is, if your leader is we call them mental models, so beliefs or philosophies. So what are the top 3, if that's our vision, whatever it is, what are the top 3 non-negotiables that we think are going to allow us to achieve that? So for example, when we talked around coach development, it might be that one of the critical mental models or beliefs we had as a group of people who were educating coaches at the time was the knowledge always sits within the learner, because all coaches have a story. So our job is to draw knowledge out of the room and then help facilitate to where we think they need to go to improve their journey. So that was like so anytime we ran a workshop or ran like a 3-day course or provided online content, we always had opportunity for reflection and questioning. The second part of that we knew was like all the content that we design needs to be co-designed with coaches. So, for example, if we're about to roll out a brand new coaching framework for female coaches, we would have talked we've got some insight from current female coaches talking about what their challenges are, what their demands are. So we've got some insights to understand what's going to be real meaningful. So if you're a leader, you should be sitting there going like, cool, so what are the mental models that actually allow us to operate and achieve our vision? And let's all get really clear on those. And you'll all have different ones because everyone's got different stories and everyone's got different opinions based on that. So getting an alignment around like, cool, we all agree that these mental models or these beliefs are the critical pieces that are going to help us achieve our vision. Once you get that understanding across critical people within the organisation, what you start seeing is like common practice or common behaviours that are aligned with those mental models.
Mm-hmm. What's an example of a mental model in a business context?
That's a good question. What's an example? I mean, a mental model in just like human context around how it shifts is people used to think the world was square, and now we know it's round based off research. A mental model in the business context could be, or mental model, this is actually a real common mental model that I find a lot when I ask business owners, what do you think people show up to work? A lot of business owners will say for a paycheck. And my challenge to that, not saying that they don't show up for pay, because obviously people want to get paid. But the second part there might be that they actually show up because they might feel valued. They might be passionate about the industry they work in. They might feel as though they're really young at a university, they want to make a difference in that industry. So a mental model as a boss, you could be like, or say the CFO. The CFO might be like, people's motivation to be at work is money. The CEO might say, people's motivation to be at this organisation is because they're passionate about the product that we sell. So straight away, you've got two leaders with two different mental models.
Yep.
So if you actually got them in the room and talked about like, what do we know? The biggest challenge I'd put to leaders is, do you think or do you know? Because if you know,
question.
That means you've gone out to people, you've talked to colleagues, you've talked to people that used to work at the organisation. Whereas we hear this all the time in meetings. I think that player A is blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, do you think or do you know? Have you got stats to back up what you just claimed there? So I think that's an important question to ask yourself as leaders. Do you think or do you know? So I suppose that's an example of how that might play out in the business world in terms of mental models. And then the second part, which I think is, the third part of if you're a leader and it's like, what should I do now to improve myself is, I would strongly recommend, like, what are you doing to lead yourself? So, and by lead yourself, so what do you know about yourself? Not what you think you know about yourself. What do you actually know about yourself in terms of the way you behave and how you come across to your peers? Yep. And once you understand that, then do you have we used to call them you plans, like what's your plan to help you thrive at your best as a leader? So once you understand that, then going back to what we said, if you know yourself really well, you're not going to be the boss that beelines under pressure. They don't beeline straight into their office. But if they've got a personality tendency to become quite introverted and closed off when pressure comes on them, if they know that about themselves, when they feel the profit and loss come on, or people might have left the organisation that were critical to the success, or so they've got to recruit, so whatever stress they're getting, if they understand that, my trigger is actually I shut down, I stop talking to people. If you know that, you can go out of your way to be like your boss and be like, right, today I am under pressure, but I need to go and connect with 5 people before I go to my office, role model that behaviour. Cool, once you get into the office, feel free to have meetings with people and talk to people about some of your stresses and some of your concerns. But if you going back to the number one person you can lead as a leader is yourself. And if you understand that to begin with, then you can start leading others, you can start leading leaders. The fourth part, sorry if I'd add to that, is what are you doing to grow other leaders? Yeah, good. Because if you're the critical leader of your organisation, you just can't be the leader to everyone. So what are you doing to grow other leaders in your organisation? But before you get to that, you've got to know how to lead yourself. Yeah, that's dynamite. I like the you plan as well. As you said, that it's difficult to have a plan if there isn't the awareness. Yeah, that's exactly right. Otherwise, you're just guessing. And again, it was Chad Tuato, the campaign manager when I was working at Sevens. He was the first person to introduce me to the you plan. And we used to have things. We used to have things as basic as, it was like what's the goal? Why is it important to you? How are you going to monitor it? And what are the actions that you're going to take to get it? But we used to break it down to literally it'd be things like, my exercise. I know for a fact that I'm at my best when I get my exercise. So it would be like when we're in campaign, like away on tour overseas, we'd be working out in courtyards at our hotels because management team members knew that exercise was a critical piece to them functioning at their best. So that became a priority for anyone in a U plan that had that as part of the U plan, started talking. And then so we would know, even down to the things like one coach had a thing down like how much fruit and vegetables they would eat in the day because they knew if they ate well.
Yeah.
So like part of their planning was like when we would go on big tours, what are they doing to help? What are the actions required so you can eat really well when you go on tour? And people might be like, oh, but that's just common sense. They're like, yeah, but if you don't ink it, if you think it but don't ink it, it might just not happen.
Love that.
If you just think it, be like, I think I really function well on vegetables. I'm not going to tell anyone about it. I'm not going to write it down and hold myself accountable. I just think that makes me better. Whereas when we actually wrote them down and shared them with each other, there was like an accountable piece.
Yeah, I love that. You've put out a few one-liners today, Jimmy.
Yeah, too many quotes.
Think it but don't ink it. There's going to be a series of grid posts off of this.
I did steal.
This
all my
podcast.
quotes are stolen from other great people, great coaches that I've learnt off.
Yeah, let's finish with that. What if you were going to recommend a couple of resources to go away and do some further reading, other than doing the Hogan profile with you? What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the greatest books you can read if you're all about culture is The Culture Code by Daniel Cole, I believe it is. Have you read that book?
Daniel.
Was it Daniel?
Coit.
Oh, is it? It's called
It's by Daniel someone, but I have read it. Yes,
it's very good, and I think what that book demonstrates is it's one of the best books I've seen that takes real life examples of practical cultures that have thrived and survived the test of time, and it links it with research. So they've literally gone, this is what we know, and here's some examples of where it's actually played out, which I found really powerful, that book. There's a really cool book, I think, if you're a leader, which is a little bit left field, called Unleashing Greatness by David Galbraith, who's a really well-respected sports psychologist. Has worked with a lot of our Olympic athletes, and I think that's a really cool book to test. That book helped me design the anchors. That really tested my thinking around what are my values that I live by, because before I read that book I didn't have any, and it really allows you to live from a place of being really authentic to yourself. That'd be a really cool book. If you wanted to delve into that book. And mate, the last thing I'd say from a resourcing point of view was just surround yourself with really good people. So if you want to be optimistic, go hang out with optimistic people. If you want to be pessimistic, go hang out with pessimistic. Be really clear on who's in your support network and what are they allowing. What do they bring that allows you to thrive? Is probably the last piece I'd say. So being really aware of that.
Yeah, I love that idea of a you plan, and the environment that you create around yourself should just be reflective of wherever the you plan is designed to take you.
Yeah, totally.
If you know where it is you want to go and you have a plan to get there, the way to what will help you get you there is the people around you.
100%, that's right. I think, the you plan definitely is something that's a really good point. That's something that's definitely changed and supported, whether I've been coaching or whether it's just been for work, like rather than talking around performance plans, because we do performance plans for lots of our players, but we talk around the 6 pillars of development, which is very holistic. But the you plan really emphasise, that language really emphasises that it's about you as a person, and it's not about you as a performer.
I like that distinction.
Which again, that was Chad, the performance manager at the time, who really drove that kind of mindset around how do we get the best out of you as a person, because that's going to allow you to be the best as a coach, which was a different level of thinking at the time, which was really cool. A different level of thinking for me,
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, Jimmy.
Thanks for having me, mate. That was a great conversation. Like I say, I always learn just as much off you, so that was great to connect. High five. Nice.
See you on the next one.